though we were delivering on whatever was promised in terms of the reforms and economy, I feel we did go wrong in turning blind eye to certain matters. I feel we failed to build that public trust. And to be very blunt, at the end of the day, if an individual had excess baggage, namely, say something to do with corruption or one of those antisocial elements, it was not taken upon well by the public, and you can't blame them. I think more than saying President Vikramasinghe's loss did it cause an impact on CWC, I would have to say President Anura Kumara Dissanayaka's victory has caused an impact on all parties. We are Sri Lankans. At the end of the day, even housing, why is India building houses for us? Sri Lanka should build houses for us.
The performance of President Ranil Wickremesinghe at the last presidential election did raise a few eyebrows, especially since on stage he noted how much he and his government had done prior to this election, had the issues that they had addressed, the economic crisis, of course, the solutions that they had put forward, and the solutions that they were able to provide. Yet the people voted against that government. One member of that government who is contesting this election and who has been a very strong voice for the plantation sector is former minister and former MP Jeevan Thondaman. He's, of course, the General Secretary of the Ceylon Workers Congress. And joining me on the program today is Jeevan Thondaman to discuss his preparations for the upcoming parliamentary elections and maybe a look back at the performance of the government, the former government, I may say. Jeevan, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Sean. Always a pleasure.
Stephen, before we talk about the plantation community and how the CWC is going to face the upcoming parliamentary elections, I'd like to just take a step back and look at the presidential elections. You know, a lot of people, or let's say the government, including then President Ranil Wickremesinghe, went on stage and said, "Look, these are the things that we did. We showed the performance, we put down the numbers." Yet the people voted against that government. The people voted against Ranil Wickremesinghe, and we see some MPs who were in that government really, um, you know, disappointed at the outcome. Where did you think, in your opinion, did Ranil Wickremesinghe go wrong, if I should use that word, or why the people voted against him?
Well, first of all, it's nice to be interviewed by you yet again, and again in an election period. So, to answer your question, Ishwaran, it's quite simple, right? When we first took on this responsibility of taking charge of a country, and which was more or less going to descend into law and order chaos, we were told very clearly that you cannot expect to do governance with a political twist to it or expect any sort of political you know um, recognition for it because it's going to be difficult. Reformist agendas always are. So I think when we did take on the responsibility, we were really not looking towards the election. If you look at all the reforms that we have brought across, it's reforms that haven't been done in nearly 4 or 5 decades. And if you, for example, even take the water sector, which I was responsible for, the water sector issue prior to me coming on board, in nearly a decade there was no increase in water tariff, and similarly there was no formula, there was no sustainability, and it had an $800 million legacy debt. So obviously the changes that we were going to make, or the austerity measures that we were going to bring in, it wasn't bought in with a political intention. It wasn't bought in with the intention of how can we secure votes next election. It was bought in with the view that we've been given this responsibility, and if we're able to make all the reforms that we can, then regardless of who comes to power, they'd be able to take it forward, which is what the current president is doing, which we're happy to see. So, to answer your question as to why or where did Ranil Wickremesinghe go wrong, see, I would just like to remind you in 1991, when India had gone through somewhat of an economic crisis, a similar economic crisis, it was P.V. Narasimha Rao at that point of time who was able to bring the country out of the economic mess it was in. Unfortunately, people didn't vote for him either, but that does not show that he has not done work. Right. At the end of the day, if you look at history now, people look at him with reverence. So, with that being said, where did we go wrong? Is I feel though we were delivering on whatever was promised in terms of reforms and economy, I feel we did go wrong in turning blind eye to certain matters. I mean, intentional, unintentional. At the end of the day, I feel that we should have been given more recognition to, public trust. I feel we failed to build that public trust. Though we launched the largest land ownership program in the history of this country, though we delivered on the wages, delivered on various other matters, at the end of the day, we feel it was not communicated to the public properly. And also, apart from that, I think it also has to do with our political alliances with certain entities. Because I think when the former President Wickremesinghe took over the mantle of leadership for this country, it was not just the country that was, bankrupt, but also the morals of certain politicians that were bankrupt. And unfortunately, we felt that we need everybody's support to take it forward. And I think that has been the main deterrent for a person who would vote for Ranil Wickremesinghe at that point of time. So yeah.
Interesting that you should mention about the political decisions that the government took. I mean, this is the same opinion that is coming even from the SJB and the alliances that they made, and they feel that that is what cost them as well. And it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that you're also talking about the SLPP and the alliances with some SLPP members. That's what you're referring to when you mentioned some of the alliances that were made.
No, look, I don't want to mention names, Ishwaran, out of respect for the political parties and the individuals. But see, I mean, because you had mentioned SLPP, at the end of the day, there are popular regimes, there are unpopular regimes, but that doesn't necessarily make the individuals within that institution unpopular. Now, for example, you have ministers such as Ramesh Patirana and various other seniors who are well respected
Yeah,
amongst the community, across all spectrums. So, similarly, even in SJB, you have unsavory figures. Even in JVP, you have unsavory figures. So, at the end of the day, last time when I'm not sure if it was the interview I had with you, but I mentioned it very clearly that the parliament has lost party loyalties. There are no parliamentarians who are actually loyal to any particular party in parliament. So all this talk about particular parties is out the window. It's about those individuals, right?
right.
And to be very blunt, at the end of the day, if an individual had excess baggage, namely, say something to do with corruption or one of those antisocial elements, it was not taken upon well by the public. Then you can't blame them. At the end of the day, we can only do what we can as an individual. And certain individuals fail to live up to that, to their mandate. But however, I think despite all that, President Wickremesinghe is still getting 2.3 million votes. I feel the trust was there on him as an individual. However, the team also, I think it did come into account because one thing that was misunderstood, which I feel I can say it out right now, is that when this whole talk about a team came along, everyone wanted to see certain individuals in President Wickremesinghe's camp, but refused to see the younger politicians in President Wickremesinghe's camp who actually helped in taking the country out of the mess it was in. And similarly, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And we have to respect the people's mandate. And we have to see how to take things forward. I mean, I can give you 108 excuses as to why, we lost. But at the end of the day, it's not going to really make, change anything for the better.
A difference.
So it's only about us
But
fixing
but
ourselves and
that
moving forward.
but did his loss or Vikramasinghe's loss have any negative impact on the CWC because you have a very strong base in the hill country? Did that impact you or the
No,
CWC for that matter?
see, I think more than saying President Wickremesinghe's loss did it cause an impact on CWC, I would have to say President Anura Kumara Dissanayaka's victory has caused an impact on all parties, right? And that's something that needs to be accepted, and that's simply because you have a party which has, I think, a cabinet of three ministers, and they have not gone past their particular vote threshold, I think, apart from Madam Chandrika Kumartunga's time. So it really brings to question, okay, there are going to be new faces. What is going to be people's mentality like? And at the end of the day, I, I would have to say that it's going to be quite unpredictable because you're going to have one section of people, especially the younger section maybe, who are not going to be inclined towards established politicians, like majority of them, let's say hypothetically. But then you will have another section which will understand the dangers of providing a majority to NPP-led government or a JVP-led NPP government. Whatever, however you want to phrase it. So it's quite unpredictable in that sense. But in terms of CWC, see, when we took over the government, situation was very bad in the plantations. But I think, as far as regardless of people's, analysis of how things are, as far as the statistics goes, as far as the numbers that we have shown, as far as the development work that I have shown in the past 8 months in the past 1.5 years of being a cabinet minister, we have given importance to education. We have brought about land rights. We have given two of the highest wage increases the community has seen so far. And yet we spoke about providing an alternative permanent solution for the plantation model. So it's up to the people to decide. And I feel if I have worked true to my conscience, then we'll know whether it has impacted us in a positive or negative manner. And also, I must say, if you were to look at the postal votes across the country, you would notice, apart from Norelia, most of the other places, President Wickramasinghe was in third place. However, it was Norelia where he was in second place. And that is also because of the strength CWC has. And that's also because of the educated community within the plantations rallying around us, which, has also created an impact. So I think we're yet to see. We'll have to wait and see what the result would be. And we're looking forward to the campaign.
And how are you going to be facing this campaign? You know, let's say the NPP does get a majority in parliament. Would the CWC be looking at supporting an NPP-led government, or how are you going to be facing the election, and how are you going to be facing the post-election period? Hypothetically, of course,
See,
not knowing who's going to win.
this is a bit of a complicated answer because, for one, I must say that as far as I think everyone is aware that there is a honeymoon period, right? And well and done, let that get over, and there's no issues as such. But I think as far as the actions of the current government goes, say for example displaying cars outside and saying, oh, this so much of state resources were wasted. Well, if they really care about what they say, then they should have sold those cars or put it for auction, and utilize that money for other matters, right? As opposed to just putting on a show in that sense. So, but those are political matters, which, to each his own. I remember even when former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had won, we were busy painting all over the country, right? Even in my area. So we get all that. We know the theatrics, well and done. But I think what was of concern to me is the NPP once, the fact that they have taken the government and using a narrative where do not vote for the individual but vote for the party, that is basically telling your voter you're entitled only to half your sovereignty. Because what people fail to understand is, now, see, me personally, when my 4 years in Parliament, I'm grateful to have, communicated with current Prime Minister, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, on various matters. And, all that well and done. But now, if the NPP, who she's a part of, is saying don't vote for individuals, don't vote for preferential, but vote for the party, I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Harini Amarasuriya will win the election, through people's mandate, but she may not be given premiership. For Tilvin Silva might be given premiership, or Mr. Lal Kanta might be given premiership. It's going to depend on who the party wants. So that is of concern to me, and whether we would work with a party which forms the government, a party which is telling people you can exercise only half your liberties. That is going to be a point of concern for me. And also, without another thing being said, see, I think we should also take geopolitics into account and also the global situation. If you look at a barrel of oil, it was 70. right? I think now it's gone up to 75. And well, well, hopefully, if the situation in the Middle East, you know, is restricted, then we would be able to contain, whatever economic progress we made so far. However, if the price of an oil barrel were to go up, say even by $20, then I think economic crisis will be knocking on our door again. So I think at that particular point of time, we should not, we should be in a position where, on a case by case basis, for the sake of stability, there are entities in Parliament which would be willing to provide the necessary stability for an NPP government, or even if a national government is formed. So we really can't predict. But I think people have to understand, even the opposition has to understand, that President Anura Kumara Dissanayake is going to be in that seat for a while, right? Hopefully, if everything goes well. We do not want, to wish the worst upon him and wish the worst upon the country. And I think that's what the opposition needs to understand more than, showing who the bigger man is. It's about how can we take this country outside, at least for the next 5 years, because you would have noticed President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, to his credit, credit where it's due, has taken forward whatever President Vikramasinghe has left behind. And, now he's enjoying the benefits of it. So kudos to him. But the point of sustainability is not just coming out of the crisis. It's about maintaining that level of progress. So I think that's what our priority is going to be, and we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, we are contesting under the alliance led by President Vikramasinghe. He's taken the country out of the crisis once, and he knows how to prevent the country from going into crisis again. And I think even President Anura Kumar Dissanayake is aware of that. So we'll go as per his advice.
But without Vikramasinghe contesting this election or even coming into parliament, um, again, a hypothetical situation, if his alliance does win, uh, the question arises: who is going to be the prime minister? Who is going to lead that alliance in parliament? I mean, who would you, as a CWC, be looking to work with as the head of
Ishwaran,
government?
Ishwaran, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think you can look for the answer in my previous question. I just made it clear to you, even if the NPP were
Right.
to win, we don't know if Dr. Harini Amarasuri is going to be the prime minister,
Mhm.
correct? And similarly, as far as the opposition is concerned, I personally feel even if SJB are able to get a majority in parliament, I still don't know if the leader of the opposition, I mean, the former leader of the opposition, would be willing to take the premier position. So this is not a question about who's going to be premier. It's about a question on, are we going to provide a parliament which is going to be able to take the country forward, or are we going to give a parliament which is more or less going to take the country back another 10 years, right? So it depends on individuals. At the end of the day, like I said, that's not an answer I can give you outright, because I don't think that's an answer any party can give you outright. You know, I can say that very confidently. However, I think at the end of the day, if all MPs who are going to be elected, I think there are going to be quite a lot of new faces in Parliament. And I feel they should all take into account that the country's stability is far more important than party politics. So that would be a main selling point.
How do you see President Anukumar Dissanayake, when it comes to addressing the issues faced by the plantation community? Do you see him as someone who can work on these issues, work with the CWC or any other plantation-based political party and address these issues?
Well,
Do you
to
think
be
he
honest, I think
understands the core issues?
From my point of view, I have spent 4 years in Parliament, and to be honest, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, he has never shown, never shown, at least in the past 4 or 5 years, they've never shown hints of racism, nationalism, and things like that. And, it's been quite inclusive, but that's also because they were capitalizing on the economic crisis. When there's no food to eat, nobody cares about which race, religion, ethnicity you are. So, to answer your question, I would have to say that I don't think President Dissanayake is too familiar with the plantations, much like many people in the country. But also at the same time, I think what was worrisome for me is now we had provided the 1,350 rupees gazette as basic salary, and we had promised that should President Ranil Wickremesinghe come to power, we would be able to provide another 350. Now that's 1,700 rupees as a total, out of which the major half has been given. Now, Ishwaran, you must know that there's something called the wages board in the government mechanism. This particular wages board, there are members who are representing the workers, and one of them is JVP, sorry, the JVP union, Mr. Kitton, I think. And same way the CWC, LGW, various other entities. Now, as far as we are concerned, Ishwaran, we had given a proposal of 1,700, with 1,350 being the basic component and 350 being the incentivized component. However, it was the JVP union that had said, we cannot agree to it. We will only agree to 2,000 rupees as a basic salary. And I had mentioned it very clearly at that point of time after negotiating with the companies for a very long and tiring period. We were able to come up with a 350 rupees increase in basic, which even the workers were happy with. And the remaining 350 rupees, we said we'll put it into an incentivized model. Now, that was the maximum I could do with my trade union strength. So now I had mentioned, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake had clearly said he would give 2,000 rupees as wages for the estate workers. I think I think this was in Talawakale as well. So he should stick to his word and the word of his union. And they should look at mechanisms on how to provide this wage. Because it is easy to be out of the system and say the government should provide this wage and these are the numbers. But it's difficult to be part of the government and actually provide it because these are private sector people we are talking about. It is, first of all, I mean, I'd never believed that the government should involve itself in something like this, but the collective agreement was abrogated. So now it's the government's responsibility. And the second matter is, yes, we noticed that, subsidies have been provided to fishermen, to farmers. However, there has been no talk about the plantation workers at all. And Ishwaran, as you're aware, the past 2 years when I was in government, or the past 4 years when I was in parliament, there we have always made sure the relevance and the importance was given to the plantation community, which is why we came up with the rights to ownership of land program for the plantation community. There was 4,000 million allocated to it. And today we do not know what the situation of that is. So it is of concern that President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, as the head of state, has not made any reassurances towards the community, but the community is expecting a statement from him, for which we would be grateful. And secondly, Ishwaran, I should also add here, that is President Anura Kumara Dissanayake in his capacity as the head of state. But if you look at President Anura Kumara Dissanayake as the head of NPP or JVP or whatever coalition, today the main candidate in Norelia district was a manager from this area called Protoft, who had harassed the workers in that particular estate and was removed from there. So that shows the level of importance President Anura Kumara Dissanayake has given to the plantation community. I mean, it's bad enough that we have certain people ruling over us in the mountains. And now, even on a parliament level, if this is what's going to be the thought process, then I'm not looking forward to a very, optimistic 5 years.
So would that also raise concerns about, you know, not just the wage issue, but I know the government was looking at acquiring land that was
Correct.
not used. I mean, would those also eventually get overturned if this is how this government or this president is dealing with the plantation issue?
Correct. So, in fact, I mean, we had a very important program, which was basically a legislation was being drawn up to convert the line rooms into villages. And the line rooms plus 10 acres of land, which includes public amenities and facilities, and basically the government takes them. Now, why does the government take them? Because right now they come under the plantation companies. So it's difficult for us to build a house. I mean, it's easy for people to sit in Colombo and say, look, no one's doing anything for this community. But what I'm saying is, for just 10 minutes, take your pity, keep it on the side, open your eyes, and see what the actual problem is. When you reduce complaining and look at more proactiveness, you'd be able to come to a solution. And we came to that very solution. However, now that has been stopped by the government. So it is of concern to us because we feel that now it's set the community back by at least a decade. Had that program come up, that would have been a game changer. People would have been independent. People wouldn't have had to go everywhere and work. They wouldn't have had to go everywhere and suffer. They would have been able to live in their house, educate their children, and more than anything, politicians would have been removed from their lives, which is the most important thing, right? Because every politician that's in our country, when they come up at the end of the day, they say, okay, why do you need me? You need me for houses. You know, this housing has become the biggest bribery game in our country. And and many politicians were against me bringing this legislation because they know if I had brought in this legislation, it would have made people independent. It would have given them a shot at life and they would not be in a situation where they are. However, politics always wins, and clearly logic was overridden. So yeah, but we'll have
And
to see.
what sort of role? Yeah. But what sort of
I mean,
role can India play here? Because India, I mean, the CWP is working very closely with India, and we see, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, the president, being invited to India, the usual where the first preference is given to India and then China. But can India play a bigger role here in ensuring that the issues of the plantation community are addressed? Since even this president seems to be going on the track of giving prominence to India over anybody else.
no, see, India at the end of the day is our closest neighbor, and the community did come from India 200 years ago. Yes, there is that element of originating from India, but we are Sri Lankans. At the end of the day, even housing, why is India building houses for us? Sri Lanka should build houses for us. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thankful to the Indian government. Even now, there's a STEM teacher program which we started. 2,000 teachers are benefiting through that. So I am thankful to them. But at the end of the day, what is the Sri Lankan government's component? So for me, I've always looked at myself as Sri Lankan. And when we went into an economic crisis, India was the first country to step up. When we went into debt restructuring, India again was the first country to step up. But today, the narrative that is being taken is India's trying to, control Sri Lanka and buy us over. No, in reality, I think what people must understand, and I think it must be said, and the truth of the matter is, India is not trying to control Sri Lanka or buy us over or keep puppets here. At the end of the day, what India is trying to do is protect their security interests, which is what any country would want to do. And though anybody can be invited to India, Ishwaran, I mean, many people have been invited to India in the past, but not necessarily, see eye to eye with India. At the end of the day, you don't have to, you know, you don't have to always maintain a good relationship. Sometimes you need to protect your sovereignty. But at the same time, it's your foreign policy which is going to decide your relationship with your neighbors. Right? Now, for example, if you look at India itself, they had their neighborhood first policy. And their neighborhood first policy has given them a good standing. Yes, there is tensions around the region, but it has benefited them than detrimented them. That's what I would say. Similarly, we need to have a foreign policy, which at the end of the day is going to be that of a transactional one as well, where we are able to maximize our economic and social benefit. That's about it. But at the same time, we must also be wary of the security interest of our neighbors. See, you can't just, just because you get along with the country or not, you can't just drift away into oblivion, no, Ishwaran. At the end of the day, India is our closest neighbor. Whatever said and done, you cannot change that. So you need to see how can we benefit through India's economic progress. I'll give you a simple example. From the time of independence, India has had, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 950 odd billion dollars in FDIs, right? And only in the last 10 years, India got more than half of that, about $432 billion roughly, right? About half of that. Now, had we attracted 1% of that, maybe we wouldn't have gone into an economic crisis. we did not have an attractive investment climate. And also, to be very honest, if we had you know, a beneficial economic relationship with our neighbors and also, on a global scale, I'm sure we wouldn't have had to face that crisis. But to answer your question, I think, this whole narrative about demonizing India needs to stop at some point of time, right? If not, we're going to be left far behind, and it's going to be burdensome on the people. So yeah.
But isn't India's, I mean, since you're talking about India and the security interests of our neighbor, isn't this relationship with India affecting our relationship with, for example, China, where China is also looking at, bringing a lot of funds to Sri Lanka, yet we are a bit wary
Well,
about the impact that this will have with India, and as a result, we are sort of cutting short in certain extent.
there's this proverb, Easwaran, when elephants fight, grass gets hurt, right? The reason I'm saying that is because India has never told us not to take investments from China. China has never told us don't take investments from India. At the end of the day, our leaders were taking investments or loans from both countries, which is what also led to the economic crisis. See, at the end of the day, state places where you need to hold your leaders accountable, you're holding other countries accountable. How is that fair? Yeah, China gave us loans. That's fine. They have the money, they're giving us a loan. If your neighbor walks up to you tomorrow, Ishwaran, and says, here, Ishwaran, keep, 1,000 rupees as a loan, are you going to say no? It's how you spend it. Do you want to invest that thousand, or do you want to take that thousand and, party it off, if I can say? So, more or less, at the end of the day, to my knowledge, geopolitics does exist. Each country has their interests, but that's why we are in this, game of politics. You need to protect your country's interests at the same time without allowing, other entities to breach. That's about it. It's easier said than done. But the truth of the matter is, to my knowledge, neither China nor India have come out and said anything against each other in terms of investments or relationship with, Sri Lanka, India or Sri Lanka, China. Both of those are separate entities. We shouldn't mix both of them. At the end of the day, their problem is their problem, but we shouldn't poke our nose into some place it shouldn't belong.
Since you're running out of time, finally, Jeevan, I just want to ask you, at this parliamentary election, what would be your main focus? Of course, it's the plantation community, but what would you be assuring them? What sort of voice would you be looking at raising in parliament when it comes to their issues?
Well, see, as far as I'm concerned, Ishwan, I never came in as a politician, but I worked for 4 years. And I've, done my duty as a parliamentarian as well. Though I may not be ranked very high, I think I was ranked at 111, with the next closest upcountry parliamentarian being at 226. And it's strangely enough, Parliament has only 225. So that's, I mean, anybody can go and look at this. So as a parliamentarian, I feel I've done my due diligence. And as a minister, to be very honest, I was able to function only for a year as a minister in cabinet. But we have introduced the STEM teacher training program. We've introduced um, the rights to ownership of land for the plantation workers. We've introduced the conversion of line rooms to villages. We've introduced also infrastructure facilities for school at a rate it's never been done before. In fact, I'll be more than happy to share the files with you. But in my 1 year as a cabinet minister is where the most amount of allocation has gone for the plantation schools and the education and health sector. And similarly, I think to the plantation community, I feel I've been quite upfront with what my policies are. So I will more or less be asking my mandate on continuing whatever I've done in the past, and also to ensure the protection of the representation in the community. And also one more thing I should say, Ishwaran, here, I the votes I received, it was not just the plantation community. Majority were from the informal sector. I constantly keep saying in an estate out of 100 families, there's only 10 families that work as plantation workers. The 90 others are not in that trade. So we are looking at how to incorporate them into Sri Lankan fabric as well. And similarly, we've earned the trust of the Sinhala community in Nuwara and also the Muslim community. So we're looking to, you know, take all that into account and ask for our mandate. In fact, there was no reason for me to actually, give focus on various other matters with the water ministry, but we still did. Because at the end of the day, I don't identify myself as a, you know, Tamil in that sense. Culturally, I'm an upcountry Tamil. There is no changing that. Yeah. So, and in fact, for many people who don't know, my grandfather's grandfather worked in the estates, and that's him. I mean, this right behind me, right? So we were not in politics all the time because I noticed after the NPP victory, people started saying, "Oh, the Thondaman wealth came from trade unionism and people." But in reality, I think we're one of the few trade unions who've actually shown um, uh, expenses and incomes to the parliament. And secondly, I think people don't know the history of my family. For those who don't know, I think this would be the only comment that I would leave on it because it's not something we have always given importance to. And it was, everyone is aware of Saumya Murthy Thondaman, my great grandfather, but not many people are aware of Mr. Karpaya Thondaman, who was his father. And he was a tea estate owner. He owned about 6,500 hectares. And at the end of the day, we had set up the Ceylon Workers Congress with the wealth that he was able to procure from the tea trade and various other interests. So that, I hope, answers many people's question. But also, Ishwaran, I think one last thing is this time when I am asking for my vote, I'm not asking as, Jeevan Thondaman, political heir, or any of that nonsense. In reality, if people have followed what I've done for 5 years, I've always made sure that I've maintained my individuality. And at the end of the day, if people vote for me for the work I've done, I mean, for the words I've spoken, that's good enough.
Jeevan, it was really good talking to you. Thank you for taking time and joining us on the program.
Thank you, Ishwaran. Take care. Thank you for another good interview as usual. Take care.